St. Simon Says, written and narrated by me, the author, Vanessa Echols. Chapter 5. By noon, Sharmelle had a splitting, blinding, hard-to-see straight headache. She was trying to mentally make sense of everything Etta Hayes had told her in their 2-hour conversation. She knew she was sworn to secrecy, but wished she could talk to someone about everything she'd learned that morning about the Hayes family. She was glad that she had chosen to bring Nancy Drew into the office with her. "Well, Nancy Drew, I promised not to discuss this with anyone, but I don't think Miss Etta would mind me going over all of this with you." She couldn't decide what part of the story was most shocking, that Lucian Hayes wasn't the late pastor's biological son, or the fact that his parents had kept a secret from him for his entire life, and he's in his 60s. Nancy Drew got quite an earful. I mean, how could they keep this secret for 60 years? Who does that? And as an adult, didn't Lucian have a right to know? What if his bio dad has some kind of inherited disease? Sharmelle asked all of these questions out loud as she looked directly into Nancy Drew's sparkling sapphire eyes. It made Sharmelle think about her own life. What if Hunter St. Simon isn't my biological father? But as soon as she said it, she realized how ridiculous she sounded. For years, family and friends talked about how she, of all the St. Simon children, looked the most like her father. But it was hard to think of the beloved Etta Hayes as a vibrant young woman falling in love with her first real boyfriend, getting pregnant, and being an unwed mother in a time when a young woman who found herself in that way was made to feel ashamed and ostracized and even pressured to leave college or the workforce. The Etta Hayes she had grown up knowing was elegant and classy and so strict about how young ladies at First Ave should conduct themselves. And each Sunday she was one of the few who still dressed like the ladies in the traditional old church in the South, a suit with embellishments, stockings, as she refused to use the term pantyhose, which made all the members under the age of 70 amused, appropriate heels, and a church hat befitting being featured on the cover of Crowns, a book about decorative church hats. And she couldn't help thinking about Etta's husband of 6 decades, the late Henry Hayes, who had been pastor of First Ave for 40 years, the longest-serving pastor in the church's 125-year history. That man was more of a saint than any of us knew, Sharmelle murmured to herself as she played over the events of the day in her mind. Under Pastor Hayes' leadership, First Ave experienced an explosive growth in membership, undertook a massive multi-million-dollar renovation to accommodate the growing church population and programs, and became a force in the community. And Pastor Hayes himself was the most well-known pastor in Pearl City, the entire state of Georgia, and according to a recent national news magazine, he was also becoming America's pastor. Sharmelle had only fond and warm memories of him. She often quoted one of his favorite phrases, "Church is a verb." And under his direction, First Ave was just that. The church had an active outreach ministry for the community with ongoing programs to help feed the hungry, an after-school program for children in the community, job counseling, tutoring, addiction recovery groups, and they'd recently purchased an abandoned building to renovate for low-income and unhoused people in the city. Sharmelle was proud of how the church was so active in the community, with major plans to do even more in the future. But they were devastated a year ago when Pastor Hayes died in his sleep, the day after church leaders broke ground on the housing project. Lyra produced a 1-hour special about his life and dedication to the community, which aired on her TV station the evening before his homegoing service. And all the 5 TV stations in town aired the homegoing service live. "And he took a big secret to the grave," Sharmelle told Nancy Drew, who seemed more interested in stretching out for an afternoon nap on the ottoman beside Sharmelle's desk. And she couldn't stop thinking about their son, Lucian, who had moved back to Pearl City with his wife, Cecilia, after Pastor Hayes died. Sharmelle loved and respected them both. They jumped right in and immediately gotten involved in the church and were a big help in working with the middle and high school students in the youth ministry. "How am I going to face them? They don't have a clue about the secret I know." Sharmelle spoke out loud to herself and only herself because Nancy Drew was peacefully sleeping. Then Sharmelle remembered she'd be facing Lucian and Cecilia soon and felt her headache worsen. They had agreed to help with a youth activity at church that evening. The students named their youth ministry The Surge, and once a month they organized an outreach project. So tonight they would be packing backpacks for a local nonprofit, Care for Foster Children. They'd already collected toiletries, socks, pajamas, towels, underwear, and hair care items, along with a few stuffed animals. Their goal for the evening was ambitious: 100 backpacks for children who enter foster care, with only the clothes they're wearing and sometimes a few belongings stuffed in plastic garbage bags. Sharmelle was excited about the project, but feeling anxious about seeing Lucian and Cecilia. She couldn't put it off any longer. It was time to start an official file for her new case. She was old school about her case notes. She started with the basics on a yellow legal pad before entering detailed notes on her laptop. And now she was staring at the new legal pad. Most of the page was blank, save for one name in the center on line 1, Marcus Pierce, written in red ink. Marcus Pierce, who are you and where are you? Sharmelle repeated out loud several times. She began her notes with what little details Etta Hayes had told her about the first romance of her life. Then she started a column with how she planned to begin her initial search online. She knew it would be tough because Marcus Pierce would be in his mid to late 80s and may not have an extensive social media presence, if one at all. "This would be a lot easier if you had social media, Mr. Pierce," Sharmelle said as she stared at the still sleeping Nancy Drew. "Nancy Drew, this would be a great mystery for you to solve, the case of the missing boyfriend/father." Sharmelle felt a little guilty about being somewhat excited about this case. It was a first of its kind and a welcome change from fraud and adultery. She had racked up an impressive success rate with those cases. She could only hope for the same success with this new one.